Welcome to new and returning listeners to Life's Journeys. I'm your host, James Devine, and my guest today is business coach and life and spiritual guide, Kristan Swan. At the conclusion of the show, check the podcast notes for a free offer from Kristan, and please share your feedback on this episode. We'd love to hear from you. And now, here's episode 3. Well, welcome everyone to Life's Journeys. I'm your host, James Devine, with business coach and spiritual guide, Kristan Swan. Kristan and I met through an online podcast community, and I was intrigued with her website where she described her experiences as a child, the twists and turns, and what she describes as an unpredictable upbringing. But first, before we delve deeper into those experiences, let me properly introduce my guest. Kristan is a business coach where she has successfully guided entrepreneurs and leaders to build successful businesses. She is a writer and creator of guides, workbooks. Kristan is an experiential learner and a life and spiritual guide. Well, welcome, Kristan, to Life's Journeys.
Thank you, James. I'm delighted to be here. And thank you for creating such a wonderful space for us to have these conversations.
You're welcome, and pleasure is all mine. So can we go back now to your experiences as a child? Could you please share how your life was unpredictable then and how you positively turned things around?
Yeah, I would say I I don't know that I will preface everything by saying I don't know how unique my experiences are. And I just know for myself how impactful, right? That these kind of this sense of uncertainty that permeated my early years, developed several different essentially survival skills. And so for starters, my parents, they separated when I was about 4 years old. And uh, I come to find out that they probably weren't a match made in heaven to begin with. They kind of met casually, and I was the result of that meeting. So I, and that was kind of confusing because I would always think when my parents split up, and even as a slightly older child, I knew people whose parents were getting divorced, and those kids always wanted their parents to get back together. And I remember thinking, I don't even know how my parents got together. So this, I think kind of some of what I was observing seemed to be out of step with kind of the norm of what I was witnessing other people feeling or thinking, right? So, um, and I'll circle back to why I think that also relates to what I'm going to say. And so upon my parents' separation, we moved a lot. I lived primarily with my mom. We moved, I'm trying to think. I think it was about 13 times, or I lived in about 12 or 13 places by the time I was starting middle school. And I mean, it was all within the same general area. However, it often meant that I needed to change schools as well. So it just created this kind of continual feeling of always being the new kid. I was an only child, so I didn't have siblings to rely upon. And so it was just this shifting landscape, right? And so part of that kind of set of survival skills that I developed was I became very vigilant, hyper vigilant around kind of watching what was going on. I was a little bit of a sponge. I would try to suss things out, whether it was in my new neighborhood or my new classrooms, and get the lay of the land, so to speak, right? And that's a great skill. And I think that, um, being so focused on kind of what was externally happening didn't allow for oftentimes kind of that internal kind of connection with myself, right? And I think one of those other survival skills that I learned pretty quickly was to blend in, to become invisible when necessary, or just kind of go with the flow, right? Just not creating any kind of, not being too loud or being too, taking up too much space. And again, uh, that worked. But as an adult, that isn't often a great operating system. And so you were asking just the kind of how did I turn that around? And it took time. I think that once a big thing that changed is once I was able to kind of have some more control over certain things in my life, that allowed me to develop some places of certainty for myself, right? I mean, once I could ride my bike places, and once I eventually was able to purchase a car, and I could, I had that mastery over transportation. I mean, just these little ways that I could kind of create little moments of peace for myself were so important. And then earlier I was saying how, there was that disconnect between kind of what I felt like I knew to be true in comparison to what I was hearing or observing from other people. And and that is the piece that took more time, was to start paying attention and to start trusting my own knowing. And
Right.
yeah, and that's hard. I mean, and that's not a linear process. That is, you get glimpses, and then and then you can kind of lose the thread, so to speak. You
Correct.
know.
If I can jump in
Yeah.
and just add just a little bit to what you're saying, and the processing is what was coming through for me what you're saying, and it took you longer to process what you had experienced as a child. Is that right?
Yes, for
Right.
sure. And also I think one of the things that we innately do as children is because again, it's a little bit of a survival skill, is we normalize our experience. And because if we were to question what our experience was, I mean, if we're questioning our parents kind of as it's happening, um, that has the potential, or at least in my case, that did not necessarily feel like a very safe conversation to have with anyone.
No, correct. And if the word resilience comes through as well, you have learned that. I'm pretty sure that's true. I myself, resilience was part, I learned that growing up. I'm an adoptee, and in my family that had adopted me, I
Mhm.
learned resilience. So I feel we have something in common there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the resilience piece is you kind of, I mean, again, it's we can recognize it and kind of after the fact, right? Because in the moment, you're feeling like you're just you're just making your way. And I think one of the things that I guess just how I'm, how I came out into this world is I do have a deeply optimistic kind of set of beliefs. And so I think that I really was pretty determined to keep moving forward because I believed that there was a way that things were going to be better or different.
Right. And the optimistic beliefs would be things like, yeah, I'm going to survive. That's come through in your website I've read and now what you are saying. And the second um, is I just lost my thought, but it was, yeah, survival and to make something positive of our experience and gratitude. That was a word that I wanted to say. I
Yes.
often, growing up, was very grateful. I just constantly was grateful as an adoptee. Thank you so much for adopting me. I don't know where I would have ended up. So
Hmm.
it's a good way to live and helped me survive as well. If I can move on to
Yeah.
the next little segment, and this was around for you, well, around 2020. For me, before 2020, which was the year I had a personal awakening, I was in a lot of turmoil and internally, not getting along with family, and a period that I've grown from, and I'm definitely now currently in a happier place. Do do you regret your past? Which you wish for a redo, and if you could, please explain why you feel this way.
Yeah, before we started recording, we were talking about our kids. And so that is, I would never ask for a redo because I have these three wonderful humans in my life. And there are certainly regrets and, sadness that I have for I'm not with their dad. We divorced after about 11 years of marriage and which was a very difficult time. And also, I got married fairly young. I wasn't at a place where I think I was probably making the best choices. So there are parts of me that wish, of course, that I hadn't been in such a rush, right? Because I think, again, I was still operating from this desire to create, stability and and part of that was in my way of thinking at that moment was I also wanted, have my own family. And essentially that was going to be my do-over. And, and instead, I ended up getting divorced. And so, yes, I think there's, it's kind of a yes and yeah, but in the big picture, no, I wouldn't do a do-over.
Right. Yes. But I understand a person who's gone through trauma and they feel that way. I would respect that. In my personal experience, I did for a while wish I could, but I, have since changed my thinking and feel that, what I experienced was, part of my growth and was meant to be.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And I do feel like, I mean, I am so grateful for, and I'm not trying to kind of sugarcoat anything, but I am so grateful for the experiences I've had. I think that there is what's harder to understand when you're younger, maybe, or at least for me, was the, there's kind of this timing that is, you know, you can't really control. And I think that that's also one of the things that I've learned along the way with these twists and turns and bumps and bruises, is to have so much more respect for just that things have a natural timing to them.
Well, that's well said too, and makes me think, of my, when I was younger and how I emotionally was handling things growing up. I didn't do so well, but
Mhm.
you learn, and I have learned, and I respect my family and have always done, even though I went through this turmoil that was my own. I brought it on myself. And so that's part of what, my memoir is about, that I'm working on now and hope to have published by the end of the year, is about this journey as an adoptee. Um,
Mm.
then just move on now
Yeah.
to the next question. In an interview you did, Kristen, not too long ago on Pockets of Knowledge, you discussed how you had a shift during the pandemic, a change in direction in your professional life. Could you please share how this came about and what became your new life focus?
Yeah, uh, well, during the pandemic, I was still an active business coach, and I was so grateful to be working with clients that I had worked with in most cases for many years. It was such an honor and pleasure to kind of become part of their trusted circle, so to speak. And during the pandemic, because I mean, frankly, there wasn't a whole lot, more to do besides work. I kind of did too much, and I made that choice. And so by the kind of as we were coming out of the pandemic, it took me a little bit to realize how just exhausted I was, and that this chapter, speaking again of timing, right? That this chapter of primarily being known as a business coach and having that be my main profession, I was coming to an end. And so I I was fortunate enough to connect with a master's program. And so I ended up enrolling and receiving a master's of education. And I thought in that moment, I thought, okay, this is going to be my new direction, right? I will teach, and that will, be a nice kind of transition of using the skills that I have and my interest and things like that. And then I realized I have been pretty much my own boss for so many years. I'm like, I just don't think I can do kind of academia. So I gave myself permission for a little while to figure out what the next step was going to be. And that was a super uncomfortable place for me to be because I always know what my next step is going to be. I mean, I usually know what my next step is going to be before the previous step is done, right? I I always know that. And this time I really, I mean, again, kind of learning about myself and learning about just not to rush things. I said, okay, you're gonna sit with it. I thankfully was hired by a woman who runs a nonprofit to help her with a book. So that kind of that kept me busy and allowed me to have this little break in terms of thinking about it was going to look like the next, this next chapter. And what I landed on is I remembered a beautiful workshop I used to do, and we would write spiritual autobiographies. And I thought, this could be a great workshop to rethink and create a new curriculum for, because this had been a couple of decades when I had first taught this. And my primary goal was to get people talking to each other, listening to themselves. And really, it was the celebration of storytelling, those stories that we tell ourselves, the stories that we tell others, the stories that we've inherited with the intent to also perhaps bring down the temperature on the amount of, kind of just the polarization that is happening within my country and also the world. So that's where I landed.
Wow. And you took an uncomfortable step, and that has a lot to do with imposter syndrome. In my experience, I have a wonderful relationship with imposter. Um, Hey, I was just going to quickly ask that if
Yeah.
you can mention, and if you can't remember, I'll get it from you eventually, but the name of the woman who helped you write your books, your journals?
Oh no, my journals I wrote myself. No, no, no.
Oh,
I mentioned that I was during my uncomfortable pause, I it was impossible for me to do nothing. So I was so grateful because a woman that I knew from previous projects was looking for help in writing her book. So I
so
assisted her in her book. And yeah, no, I am very proud of my workbooks and my journals. Those are all me.
oh no, I beg your pardon.
No, that's okay.
I
No, not
I
at
I was
all.
I knew that was the case. I was because I'm working on my memoir, it's important to
Yeah.
have a coach. So I do have a coach from a distance, and I thought perhaps you had had a coach before you started writing. That was uh, we have
Oh,
some
yeah.
we have
No, I
something in
mean,
common. Hmm.
yes, well, we do. And I love that you are writing your memoir, right? I mean, this is such, these stories. I mean, story is just it's a powerful, powerful tool for connection and learning and both internally and externally, right? Within ourselves and with others. So I, as I said, I celebrate
Yeah.
the story in all its forms.
Well, thank you for that. And I got about another 5 minutes, but I wanted to ask you, as a projection now, what do you hope for in your life in the next, say, 5 to 10 years from now?
Yeah, I mean, professionally, I hope that more people, uh, you know, get their hands on my journals because I think they're such a great tool for kind of self-awareness and maybe tampering down some of the noise in the world and kind of creating beautiful, quiet spaces for yourself. I also am currently in development for something where I I welcome people to submit their spiritual autobiographies. So kind of the result of that journey that I have on my website, and to submit their work to me. And eventually I would love to be doing a in-person exhibit that is called the Experience Collective, and that is a celebration of different people's stories, both in the written form and ultimately in all forms of art. So whether you want to tell your spiritual autobiography in painting or dance or music or whatever. So I love this idea of bringing that into the world. And in meantime, for kind of, I mean, so much of the work that I do is also deeply personally connected. So it's hard for me to separate. But on a personal level, I look forward to, you know, remaining in deep connection with the people who are important to me and making sure that I, am careful not to rush even kind of the little moments where you get a couple of minutes to talk to a friend that you haven't talked to for a while or that you can spend an evening or afternoon with family like we're going to do this weekend and really cherishing those places where we can be, I believe, kind of our whole selves.
Hmm. Well said. That's wonderful. And sounds like a wonderful projection for the future. Well, we're nearly out of time, and I just wanted to give you, Kristen, an opportunity now. Could you share with the listeners how they can find you and get in touch with you?
Yeah, for sure. The best place to find me is on my website, and that is kristanswan.com. Everything is there, the different journals we were talking about, the workbooks, as well as, I mean, if you are on Instagram, you can find me on Instagram, and I also write weekly on Substack, so that's there too. And Kristen Swan, if you look under that, that's where you'll find me.
Well, awesome. Well, and thank you. Thank you again for coming on to Life's Journeys today. It's really, truly been a pleasure.
Thank you, James, and stay well. It's been a pleasure for me as well.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today for another story of inspirational transformation. And please click the free downloadable link from Kristen on a journal and guide she is offering free today. And could you also share the link for this podcast to help grow life's journeys where we inspire one another? Tune in next week for an episode that promises to be uplifting. Until then, take care.